Welcome to the Mid Week Tease with me, Adelle Onyango, where I share some random and not too random thoughts on things. And in this episode, I want to focus on someone that you're going to spend your entire life with. It's the person whose voice you'll probably hear more than anybody else's. They're there when you wake up, when you are getting dressed, when you make a mistake, when you walk into a room full of people, when you do that presentation at work, when you look in the mirror, when you get rejected, when you succeed, when you fail. They are right there when you're lying in bed at night, replaying something that you said 6 hours ago and wondering, did I tell too much of my business? Did I say the right or the wrong thing? And that person is you. So I've really been thinking about this. What happens when the person that you hear the most from is constantly criticizing you? I touched on it maybe an episode or two ago. And ever since then, I've been thinking about it. And it's something that I'm very passionate about because I think I successfully rewired my inner voice and set terms and conditions about how I talk to myself, how I am allowed to talk to myself. Because I think so many of us have normalized speaking to ourselves in a way and in a tone and in a manner that if anybody else spoke like that to you, we would be bailing you out of jail because you would have beaten somebody up, right? But we take it. We take it from ourselves. You make a mistake and immediately you're telling yourself you're so stupid. You forget to do something and immediately you're asking yourself, what's wrong with you? You get up in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, you look in the mirror, and the first thing you tell yourself is, God, I look so terrible. You're scrolling through Instagram or whatever social media platform you enjoy the most, and you see somebody else doing something successfully, and immediately you tell yourself, look at where she is, and then look at you. What have you been doing with your life? You have a day where you don't get much done, right? You're chilling, or it's a rest day, or you're just slower than other days, which is allowed and is normal. But the first thing you tell yourself is, you're so lazy. Something you're pursuing doesn't work out. And immediately you tell yourself, of course, nothing ever works out for me. And sometimes we say these things so casually that we don't even recognize them as negative self-talk because they've just become such a normal internal narrative. It just sounds like us. It's our thoughts. It's our voice. But I want us to really interrogate this voice, hey? And the effects that this voice is having on you. Because what does constantly speaking negatively to yourself actually do to you? Why do we do it? How can we change it? First, let's start with whose voice is this? And I have to credit one member of this community for bringing this up to me. During our first ever group therapy sessions, I still remember it. We were in this lush, beautiful gardens and we're moving from one part of the garden to the other. And I'm carrying snacks and I'm going down the stairs. And I tell the lady beside me, maybe you want to go before me because I'm very clumsy. And one of the attendees who is a member of this community, she told me, you're clumsy? Are you really clumsy, or whose voice is that? Who told you that? Oh, and it was just like something that I've carried with me all this time. Whose voice is that? Before we even try to change our inner voice, ask, whose voice is this? Because we assume that because a thought is happening inside our head, it belongs to us. But does it? You know that the voice that is telling you when you make a mistake, you're useless. Who taught you that mistakes were evidence of your worth? Or when you look at your body and you think, this part of my body is terrible, or I need to fix this. Whose standards are you measuring yourself against? When you're resting, and this is for those of us who grew up in very traditional African homes where rest was synonymous with laziness. When you're resting and your inner voice says, you're lazy, you're wasting time, you should be doing something. Whose voice is that? When you accomplish something, this one normally hits so close to home for me. When you accomplish something and you immediately think, it's not enough. Whose voice is that? Where did you learn that? When you're about to take a risk and start something that you've always wanted to do, and something inside you says, that's not for you. Who said that to you first? Because sometimes that voice could be your mother's voice, your dad's voice, a teacher, an ex, a bully, a boss. Sometimes it's not even one person. Sometimes it's an entire culture. Patriarchy has a voice. Capitalism has a voice. Beauty culture has a voice. Social media has a voice. And if you hear these voices long enough, eventually they don't even need to speak anymore. You learn to speak for them. Nobody has to tell you that you're not thin enough anymore, because you're telling yourself that every time you look in the mirror. Nobody has to tell you that your value comes from productivity, because now you feel guilty when you rest. Eventually you become the person who is policing yourself. And I think that's one of the reasons it's so important for us to begin to interrupt a negative thought with a pause and then ask, whose voice is this? Ask yourself, is this something that I actually believe in? Or is this something I've heard so many times that I'm mistaking it for truth? And here's why I think we really need to have some compassion for ourselves. My goodness, my therapist drummed this into my head. Compassion, compassion, compassion. Your inner critic doesn't necessarily develop because you hate yourself. I think sometimes it develops because there's a part of you that believed criticism would keep you safe, right? And it's this crazy idea that if I'm hard on myself, I'll do better. If I notice everything that's wrong with me before anybody else, then they can't surprise me. You know, if I criticize myself before somebody else does, then maybe their criticism wouldn't hurt as much. And especially when you are a high achieving woman, there can be this deep belief that the reason I have accomplished what I've accomplished is because I never let myself off the hook. And so then you fear that if you become kinder to yourself, you might become lazy, or you might lose your ambition, or you might stop pushing yourself, or you might become complacent. Self-compassion does not mean letting yourself off the hook. It really doesn't. Like when you're being compassionate with yourself, you're not telling yourself, "Ooh, everything I do is amazing. I never need to improve anything. I am perfect as is." And I think this is important because you can hold yourself accountable without humiliating yourself. Do you know that? That's where compassion comes in. Like you can say, that wasn't my best work, without saying I'm fucking useless. You know, you can say, I really hurt this person and I need to apologize, without saying I am a terrible person. And I think you need to be very clear on the difference between discipline and cruelty. And cruelty will never birth growth. It will never, because it's cousins with shame, and you will just sit in a dark hole feeling terrible about yourself, and there will be no growth. I also feel like negative self-talk is so dangerous, because words are powerful. As a poet, I love words. I love words so much. And they're not just powerful when you encounter them once. Their true power is when you repeat words. It's what we do with affirmations. It's what we do with, even right now I'm recording this in my office, and I have my whiteboard and it's full of words around one of our shows. Everything I wrote down has come to be. And these are words that I see every day when I walk into my office. Words repeated often enough begin shaping what we believe is possible for us. And so, if you're constantly telling yourself how not good enough you are, every time you consider doing something new, your immediate internal response is going to be, you're probably going to embarrass yourself. Don't do that. Right? If you're constantly berating yourself when you in a very human way make mistakes, because it is human to make mistakes, and you're constantly telling yourself, see, you can't do anything right, every mistake you make is going to feel and look so big. It's going to be evidence of how terrible you are, when all it was a mistake. If every time someone takes a photo of you, or you take a photo of yourself and you look at it, you're constantly criticizing your body, what kind of relationship are you building with the body you have to live in every single day? Do you know what I mean? Words repeated have power. They shape what we think is possible for us. They shape who we think we are. And I want you to notice something else when it comes to negative self-talk, because negative self-talk takes something that happened and turns it into something that you are. Okay? So let's take, for example, as you're listening to this, you didn't get much done today. Instead of what happened, which is, I wasn't productive today, negative self-talk takes that and turns it into something that you are. So it becomes, I'm lazy. All right? Let's say, for example, you made a bad decision. What happened was, you made a bad decision. Negative self-talk takes that, twists it into, I make terrible decisions. You get what I mean? It takes what happened, something that happened, and twists it into identity. An experience becomes an identity. And oh my goodness, identities are so much harder to change than experiences. You know, if I made a mistake, I can learn from the mistake and I can move on. But if I am a mistake, what the hell am I supposed to do with that? So I feel like one of the most important shifts we can start to make in our inner language and how we talk to ourselves is learning to describe what happened without making it a verdict on who we are. Separate the two, separate the experience from the identity. And let's get deeper into this. Like how do we change this voice? And I don't think, again, whenever I talk to you about or share any tips, I always say this, it's not about waking up tomorrow and suddenly you're speaking beautifully to yourself. Especially if you've been speaking negatively to yourself for decades. It's going to take some time and it's going to take some practice. I want to start with something a friend told me years ago that changed everything for me. She said, speak to yourself as you would your lover. And now I find myself, honestly, I did it for years. She told me this back when I was still on radio. So it was probably like 2018, thereabouts, she told me. And I'm feeling the effects now, right? I find myself talking to myself, and I'll even say, babe, to myself, or love, so naturally. I don't even have to think about it. But it took a lot of practice to get here. So that's the foundation I'm basing all of my tips on, right? And then also you can start to catch the sentence. Start noticing what you're actually saying to yourself. Let me tell you, you will be shocked. Listen closely when you've made a mistake, when you look in the mirror, when you see someone doing better than you, when you receive criticism, when you get rejected, when you feel tired, when you don't meet one of your own expectations. Listen to what your inner voice is telling yourself, because those moments tend to reveal the voice. And when you catch the sentence, don't immediately fight it. Imagine just spectate, just notice and be like, ooh, okay, that's how I speak to myself when I'm disappointed. Because we can change something that we're not aware of first. So first we've got to be aware. And then let's get back to what I said earlier on. Ask yourself, whose voice is this? Now you've listened. Now you're aware. Ask yourself, Whose voice is this? This is such an important practice. Where did I learn to speak to myself like this? Who's that first person who made me feel like this part of myself was unacceptable? I do this one a lot with myself when I look at myself in pictures or in episodes because of the nature of my work, I have to review myself a lot. So we shoot shows, the production team sends me stuff that I have to review, so I have to watch myself, right? And I have to see what I look like. They send me photos from a photo shoot, I have to review that and I have to approve, right? And what I've started doing with myself is whenever I find myself saying, "Ooh, are you sure about this bald head? Are you sure about this ABCD? Oh, don't you think you're looking a bit too thin there?" The first thing I say is, "Who told you? According to who? According to who?" And let me tell you, that hushes that voice instantly because we did not tell ourselves that. So we, around here, we do not judge ourselves based on other people, based on beauty culture, based on patriarchy, based on social media, based on a terrible aunt I had. No, I'm the one who sets the standards. You know what I mean? And you've got to ask, whose voice is this? Ask yourself, is this my belief? Ama, have I adopted somebody else's fear? Right? And identifying the source helps you create space and distance between you and the thought. So now, if the voice said, "I am not enough," because you've asked, whose voice is this, now you can change that sentence to, "I learned that I wasn't enough." Do you see the space that has been created there? And then let's get to the next thing I want you to do. I need you to separate the behavior from identity. So describe what happened, not who you supposedly are because it happened, right? So I procrastinated today. That's what happened. Not I'm lazy. You're not lazy. And this one is really important to me because I had an aunt who constantly kept telling me I'm lazy. And I think I've told you this on maybe another one of our shows. And I really found out in therapy that part of me overworking, overperforming, really pushing myself to be overachieving was because I was carrying her voice in my head, right? And I was trying to prove her wrong because I was just like, I'm not lazy. I'm going to show you, right? And so even when I would get a win, I wouldn't sit in it because I'm like, if I sit in it, I'm going to become lazy, right? But those were not my words. Those were not my words. So I found that was making it so difficult for me to even have a rest day because I would rest and it wouldn't be, "Oh, look at that. You showed yourself some love by honoring your exhaustion and saying, today we're going to take it easy." No, it would become, "I'm lazy. So and so was right." You know what I mean? And you've got to just separate the behavior from the identity. The next thing I want us to do is, oh my God, can we please replace cruelty with accuracy? This one really matters to me because sometimes positive self-talk feels ridiculous when you don't believe it. If you've just messed up something and your brain says, "I'm terrible at this," I'm not telling you to now jump to, "No, I am incredible at everything." No, because like your brain is also going to be like, "Sister, sister, please." So try accuracy. Try accuracy. I do this with my drums all the time because I share a lot of me drumming and I'm not the world's best drummer. I'm nowhere close. I think I'm actually still in like amateur zone, to be very honest. I just get so much joy from it. But even when I hesitate to share, because we've been conditioned to think that you can only share things that you're perfect at on social media, which is ridiculous. When I hesitate, I have to remind myself, "Hey, babes, You are learning this thing. You might not be, the world's best drama. You're not very good at it yet, but you're learning it. That's something. You know what I mean? Even when I make a mistake, when I'm drumming, I'm like, yeah, you're learning. And I don't immediately think I'm terrible at this. I ruin everything. I'm not good at anything. And so remove the cruelty and bring back accuracy. When you get onto social media and you see somebody else's life looking more spectacular, more glamorous, more successful than yours, instead of telling yourself, everybody's ahead of me, let's try accuracy, right? What's accurately happening in that moment is I'm comparing my life to a teeny weeny piece of somebody else's life. When you look at the mirror and you're pointing out all of the things that are, in your words, in a voice, terrible, and you say my body looks terrible, and especially for us women, our cycle can bring actual physical changes to what our body looks like, right? And so maybe let's bring accuracy in and say, my body looks different today and I'm having strong feelings about that. Accuracy. Because it's very ambitious to say that we're going to jump from self-hatred to self-worship. No. We could just start with moving from cruelty to truth. This next one, I think, will be the changing point for you. Ask yourself whether you would say this to someone you love. Whether the person that you love is a sibling or your child, your best friend, your partner. The things your inner voice is telling you, would you say that to someone you love? Genuinely, try it. Imagine someone you deeply love comes to you and says, hey, I made this and this mistake. Would your response be, you're so fucking stupid, you always mess everything up, this is why nothing works for you? You probably would not say that. You might say, okay, I hear you, that wasn't great. What happened? Talk to me about it. What can we do differently? You deserve access to that voice too. That voice that you say for the people that you love, you deserve access to that voice too. Now, life can be very long. And so the next thing you need to think about is, how can you build an inner voice that can hold you through life? You need something steady. You need a voice that you can trust. You need a voice that can say, that wasn't okay, but that can also say, hey, I think you can repair it. You need a voice that can remind you, hey, you're exhausted, go to bed. You're scared, but I think we should still try this. No, we're not allowing someone to treat us like that. Yes, you don't know how to do this yet, but we can learn. You know what I mean? You need a voice that reminds you, look how far you've come, or just says, hey, try again. You need a voice that is firm when it needs to be, soft when it needs to be, accountable, encouraging, but never abusive. Please start working on getting rid of that negative self-talk. It's holding you back in so many unimaginably huge ways. And before I go, I also just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who got a ticket for Mannerless Women Live. This is our first live gathering and it's sold out. And that means a lot to me and the entire team. This thank you is from all of us. We're putting so much thought and care into what that day is going to feel like. We've listened to what you want to experience and incorporated quite a bit. And I can't wait to experience it with you. And so if you have a ticket, please keep an eye out on your email that you used when you were getting your ticket, or on your WhatsApp, or on the Legally Clueless socials. As we get closer to the day, we'll be sharing regular updates with you, things you need to know, what to expect. a few tidbits on what we're preparing for you. So don't worry, we're going to make sure you're kept in the loop as we count down to For Mannerless Women Live. And again, thank you. We really can't wait to have you in the room. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one last question. If the voice inside your head belonged to another person, would you want to spend your entire life with them? If you feel moved to respond to that question in the comment section, wherever you're listening to this on, please do. But answer it. If the voice inside your head belonged to another person, would you want to spend your entire life with them? Thank you for listening to this episode to the very end. And if you connected with it, share it with someone that you love. Thanks for listening to the Mid Week Tease, a Legally Clueless Africa production. Episodes go out every Wednesday, and you can learn more about us by going to legallycluelessafrica.com.